became the youngest mayor in America at 21 years old. No money, no political machine, no connections, just a kid with a dream. Along the way, I learned 6 key principles that changed my life. I'm going to share these principles so that you can apply them to your own battles in business, leadership, or life. Starting with principle 1, dress like you're the mayor. When I first decided to run for mayor in 1999, I was just 21 years old. I knew that I didn't have the money, I didn't have the political machine, but I did have one strategy. That was to go door to door, every single house. If I was going to earn the trust of my neighbors, I would be face-to-face, one-on-one conversations at a time. One morning, I was out walking a neighborhood right behind City Hall. Back then it was easy. No fences, house after house. You could work the entire block in a few hours. I knocked on a door, and it turned out to be the home of Mrs. Bracker and her partner Will. Now, Will had just worked in marketing and communications for a top New York firm, and one of their big clients was TWA, the airline. He'd been brought in during one of the most difficult times imaginable, a plane crash. His job was to manage crisis communications, to represent a company under intense public scrutiny. This was a man who understood better than most how the public sees leadership. We started talking, and as a college kid fresh out of graduation, I was eager to listen. At one point, he leaned in and gave me advice that stuck with me for the rest of my career. He said, if you want people to believe you can be mayor, you have to dress like you're the mayor. People need to see it before they can believe it. That simple statement hit me. Here I was, a 21-year-old asking people to trust me with their city, but if I was gonna show up looking like a college student, that vision would never land. You see, leadership isn't just about what you say, it's about what people see. From that day forward, I made a simple change, suit and tie. Sometimes a sports coat and a crisp white shirt, but always professional. Always projecting the image of someone that could sit at the head of a table, who could represent the community, who could be trusted with the responsibility of office. And here's the principle. Perception creates credibility. If you want others to believe in you, you have to first show them who you are and where you're going. That doesn't mean being fake or pretending to be someone you're not. It means aligning how you present yourself with a vision you want others to follow. Because in leadership, people don't just hear your message, they see it. Principle 2, believe before others do. Before anyone's believed that I could become mayor, I had to convince myself. I remember the exact moment. It was 1999, and I was 21. I had been traveling with Vice President Gore across the country during his presidential campaign, and along the way, I met Joe Palino, the former mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. He told me something that I will never forget. He said, if you believe you're ready, then you're ready. That stayed with me. Because when you're young, when you don't have decades of experience or a long resume, the first thing that people will challenge is your belief. Do you believe in yourself enough to take the risk? Enough to walk into the fire? So I flew back to Tucson, and I called my parents with my great idea that I was going to run for mayor. They were the first real test of my conviction, because if I couldn't convince them, how was I ever going to convince an entire city? I started with my dad. He listened, asked questions about how it would be, and right away he said, go for it. He didn't see my age as a barrier. He saw the energy, the vision, and he backed me. That gave me confidence. Then came the harder part, because talking with my mom, she had a little bit more of a caution. She was then on the city council and understood the inner workings of the city. She asked the hard questions about my readiness, about the risks, about whether I had truly thought this through. And in that conversation, I realized something very powerful. If I didn't fully believe that I was ready, she was going to sense it. But the more I spoke with conviction, the more she began to see it. And slowly, her hesitation turned into belief. And when my mom finally said, okay, I'll support you, I knew that if I could win her over, I could win anyone over. And here's the principle. Conviction creates reality. Nothing moves until you believe in yourself first. No campaign, no company, no vision ever gets off the ground unless the leader has an unshakable belief in what they're doing. Because belief is contagious. If you don't believe, no one else will. But when you do, when you are clear, when you're confident, and when you're committed, others start to see what you see. First it was my dad, then it was my mom, then it became my community. That's how movements begin. So before you try to sell anyone your dream, ask yourself, do you believe it enough to live it, to breathe it, and to defend it? Principle 3, network is net worth. When you're 21 and running for mayor, everything feels new. Every step is unfamiliar. And for me, one of the hardest things early on was speaking live on the radio. That was the year 2000. No smartphones, no WhatsApp, no social media feeds. The radio was still the most direct way to reach people. And if you wanted to communicate with an entire city, to one of the most popular stations locally in Nogales. For me, that was Radio Geni, the most widely listened to station. One morning, I was on a call-in show, nervously answering questions from listeners about my candidacy. And afterward, the station owner, Don Ramon, asked me to come into his office. He told me that his son, Juan Pablo, who loved politics, he studied at the University of Arizona, just like me. And Don Ramon wanted us to meet. So we set up a time to meet at a local hotel, the Americana. When Juan Pablo walked in with his girlfriend, Christy, I realized something amazing. He and I had actually taken the same political science class at the university. We had been in the same room, learning the same material, and yet we had never introduced ourselves. Now, here we were, meeting for the first time because of his father's introduction. What made Juan Pablo remarkable was that he and his sister were both born blind. But he didn't let that define him. He was sharp, funny, driven. And he hosted a weekend show with news, music, comedy at his radio station. We became fast friends. And through that friendship, I got more comfortable on the radio. Juan Pablo gave me confidence. He showed me how to relax, how to enjoy it, and how to connect to listeners through the microphone. Over time, I went from being anxious about radio interviews to actually enjoying them. And that relationship mattered far beyond the campaign. I kept going back to Radio Geni, not just during the election, but as mayor. I would sit in the studio, take live calls from residents, and respond to their concerns in real time. It was one of the most direct forms of public service you could imagine. People knew they could call, ask about a pothole, a permit, or any other problem, and that City Hall would respond. Here's the principle. Your network is your net worth, but not in the shallow sense, who can help me get ahead? It's about building authentic connections with people who bring their own unique talents, perspectives, and strengths. Every relationship you form adds something to your life, a skill, an insight, a door that opens. Juan Pablo wasn't just a friend who gave me access to the airwaves. He gave me confidence, taught me how to communicate better, and helped me serve my city more effectively. That's the kind of network that truly builds your net worth. Because leadership isn't a solo act. It's the community you build around you that makes all the difference. Principle 4, accept all the food. One of the things about running for mayor in a small border town like Nogales is that you don't just shake hands, you share meals. I knocked on more than 4,000 doors 3 times during the campaign. And if you're ever gonna walk door to door and it's gonna work, you know that there is a strategy to this. You figure out what time of the day people are home, when they're more open to talk. For me, it was usually in the afternoon, right around lunchtime. And here's what I learned. In our culture, the heart of the home is the mother or the grandmother, sometimes even the great-grandmother. The mother figure was almost always the one who answered the door in the middle of the day. And 9 times out of 10, she wouldn't just stand there and listen to you talk about politics. She'd invite you inside. ¿Quieres agua? Sit down, have a sandwich, take a Coke, take a cookie. And I usually ended up with a Coke, an iced tea, or just a glass of water. And here's the rule I learned. You never say no. Because this wasn't just about food, it was about respect. When someone invites you into their home, into their safe space, they're not just offering you a drink, they're offering you trust. They're saying, I see you, I welcome you, I support you. And that made the campaign much, much slower. You can imagine how much longer it takes when you're not just knocking on doors, but sitting down at the kitchen tables. But it also made the campaign deeper. Those conversations over cookies, sandwiches, tortillas became the foundation of real relationships. And that principle has stayed with me long after the campaign. Accept all food. You see, in leadership, people will offer you support in different ways. Sometimes it's an invitation to their home. Sometimes it's showing up at their kids' Little League game. Sometimes it's a word of encouragement or a small gesture. Whatever it is, accept it. Recognize it. That's how people manifest their belief in you. Leadership isn't built on speeches or rallies alone. It's built one living room at a time, one kitchen table at a time, one shared meal at a time. Those moments of hospitality aren't a distraction. They are the work. Because at the end of the day, leadership is about relationships. And relationships are built by saying yes when someone opens their door, their heart, or their table. Principle 5, resilience beats resistance. The truth about leadership is this: the moment you decide to step forward, there will be people who want to pull you down. When I ran for mayor at 21, the naysayers were everywhere. People who had been around politics for many, many years. Some who had run for mayor themselves and lost. Some who thought they were next in line. They looked at me and they all said, "No way, you're too young. You don't have the experience. You don't have the network. You should wait your turn. Run for school board. Start smaller." And if I had listened to them, I never would have run. Or maybe I would have stepped into the race so shaken by doubt, I wouldn't have lasted. Here's the reality. When people tell you all the reasons you can't succeed, they're often projecting their own limitations. They're manifesting their insecurities, their fears, or their disappointments onto you. Sometimes it's jealousy, sometimes it's bitterness, and sometimes it's simply their lack of imagination. But none of that has to be your truth. That's where resilience comes in. Because yes, you need conviction, you need a network, you need to accept support. All of that matters. But after you've done all those things, there will still be people standing in your way. Anchors of negativity. People who, no matter what, want to see you fail. And here's the principle. Resilience is the discipline to stick to your plan when others are tearing it apart. It's the ability to say, "Thank you for your opinion," and then keep moving forward anyway. It's rejecting those voices that drag you down so you can keep walking towards your vision. In my case, I was surrounded by opponents who had wanted the office for many years, but I couldn't let their disappointment become my barrier. I had to stay focused on my path. And once I won, that resilience became even more important because the same critics who doubted me as a candidate doubted me as a mayor. The negativity didn't stop. It never does. But leadership is not about pleasing everyone. It's about pressing forward, knowing that there will be resistance, and refusing to let it define you. So if you're building a business, starting a movement, or even just chasing a personal goal, remember this: the naysayers will always be there. You cannot eliminate them, but you can outlast them. Because in the end, resilience doesn't just help you survive opposition. It's what turns resistance into your own momentum. Principle 6, David beats Goliath. When I entered the mayor's race in Nogales in 2000, I was a definition of an underdog. I had no political experience in local office. I had just graduated from the University of Arizona. I had worked as a congressional page in Washington, D.C., and I had traveled with Vice President Gore on his presidential campaign. So I had experience, but not the kind of local experience that voters usually cared about. My opponents, on the other hand, were the establishment. One was a vice mayor. The other was a president of the school board. They had the networks, the money, the influence. Everyone thought it was their turn. And then there was I, 21 years old, no big donors, no track record, just energy and vision for change. We raised a little bit over $5,000, not from big checks, but from neighbors, family, friends, coworkers, $5 here, $20 there. My opponents raised 4, 5, even 6 times that amount. I was going to walk to every single house in Nogales. Not once, 3, and maybe even 4 times if necessary. We set up a tiny office with 6 phone lines. Volunteers called voters and wrote down notes from those conversations. And every day I hit the streets, mornings, afternoons, evenings. If a voter said what their issue was, and if it was potholes, I remembered that. If someone was worried about city services, I came prepared with answers. I shook hands, looked people in the eye, and earned trust one doorstep at a time. I also showed up at the radio stations. I spoke directly to people on the air, took their calls, made sure they knew I was listening. When the establishment candidates were spending money, I was spending time. And you know what? It worked. Because when you're the underdog, people expect you to lose. That's your advantage. You can move faster, connect deeper, and outwork anyone who thinks the race is already theirs. And here's the principle. David always beats Goliath. Don't be intimidated by size, by money, by connections. If you've got vision, resilience, and the courage to hustle harder than anyone else, you can overcome the odds. The establishment thought that it was their turn, but the people decided it was mine. That victory at 21 wasn't just about me. It was about proving that with enough drive and belief, even the smallest campaign could defeat the biggest giants. And that's the lesson. Never count out the underdog, especially if that underdog is you. So there you have it, the 6 principles I learned as the youngest mayor in America at 21 years old. If a 21-year-old kid from Nogales, Arizona, with $5,000 and a lot of determination could do it, why not you? Leadership isn't about waiting for permission. It's about showing up, believing in yourself, building relationships, and pushing through the resistance. So whatever your dream is, politics, business, or something entirely different, start now. Knock on those doors, share your vision, and don't let anyone tell you that it's impossible. Because if I could do it, so could you.